Today, we are joined by Blaise Grimes-Viort, a 20-year veteran in leadership, C-suite and consulting.
I head up an engagement consultancy, effectively. We work with companies on three different aspects of their business. One is around social media engagement, how they're learning from those people's behaviours as well. The other aspect is when they bring these people into their communities within their businesses or around their businesses, creating reciprocal relationships with value going both ways.
In September, we launched the Digital Community Leaders Report. Blaise, you were involved in providing some expert thoughts, and today we're going to go through 3 takeaways you have from the report.
I'm going to pick up on tech changes, including AI. There's 2 diagrams there, and parallel on the other side of it is developing the right skills, which obviously I think sits very nicely side by side. I did spend a lot of time in the social media industry as well as the community industry, so I've seen some of these developments. I think the social media industry in some ways is ahead of community management now because of mass use of it.
Hi Blaise, great to have you here. Hello and welcome to the Digital Community Leaders podcast, where we chat with community managers, champions and founders about their experience leading and supporting digital communities. My name is Pete Heslop and I lead the team at Steadfast Collective, and we exist to craft digital applications that bring people together. We created the Digital Community Leaders podcast to be a bite-sized look into what it takes to start, grow and scale digital communities. Today, we are joined by Blaise Grimes-Viort, a 20-year veteran in leadership, C-suite and consulting, crafts worldwide social media solutions. He leads remote teams specializing in people-centric strategies and owns transformation agency The Answer, collaborating with major brands. Hi, Blaise. Great to have you here. Thank you for taking the time.
Hi, Pete. Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you first got stuck into the wonderful world of community?
Sure. So I answered a paper ad on a university billboards, if you remember those, for moderators for a website then known as Friends Reunited. Probably the first.
Wow. Okay.
First academic, anyway. Well, no, I don't think it was academic, was it? It was probably one of the first social networks, anyway. I then worked for the same agency on the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy website, which had just been acquired by the BBC, and we had to clean up all the content. Again, a great early example of a wiki. And then I cut my teeth on I think the first iteration of the Sony PlayStation forums, and then moved on up from there, basically, over the years. Yeah.
That is an unbelievable origin story. That's super fun. So then what were you doing at PlayStation? Was it for PlayStation or for PlayStation forums?
So it's the PlayStation forums. Well, initially it was moderation of the content on there in English and in French, and then supporting their French team, their French territory manager as, basically outsourced community manager to help them develop that side of the platform.
That's loads of fun. And why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're up to these days?
Sure. So, I head up an engagement consultancy, effectively. I mean, we work with companies on 3 different aspects of their business. One is around social media engagement. How are they interacting with their consumers generally, or people on social media? How are they learning from those people's behaviours as well? The other aspect is when they bring these people into their communities within their businesses or around their businesses, how they're developing those relationships, creating reciprocal relationships with value going both ways, developing their products, generating revenue where appropriate, and so on and so forth. And then the third aspect is the internal engagements within organizations, which, over the years I've led remote teams and, blended hybrid teams, and I've found myself generally, I've never had training as a manager at all, or as a C-suite leader. It has mostly come from me applying community management techniques. And I found it's very, very similar, particularly if you're working remotely or in a hybrid fashion. So we work with companies in developing alignment between departments, how to interact effectively, non-aggressive communication, remote communication, setting up interaction systems with them and processes so they can be best effective working together.
Yeah. I know that us as a team of less than 20 going from all being in person to being remote takes a lot of intentionality around culture and community. And I imagine for companies, for large, enterprise-sized companies of thousands or 10,000 people, it must be a real shock to the system where they're used to having bums on seats, and now they're having to build culture over probably Microsoft Teams. Bless their souls. It's a real shock to the system, to HR, culture, teams, the whole lot, I would imagine.
Well, absolutely. I think the biggest challenge is, in fact, you said it, the developing culture internally, where some people are physically there. We know that, statistically, you're more likely to get noticed and get a promotion if you are physically present. That's not always the right decision from an organizational perspective. So, we work with companies in developing unified cultures and unified management and reward models and recognition models. Some people are not as comfortable with digital communication, and so it's ensuring that they have those skills and those abilities to participate fully, particularly when their personality might be that they don't feel comfortable speaking in this kind of environment, for example, or indeed if they are the remote participants, we know that people in the room tend to have a nice conversation amongst themselves, and the people on the screen don't really get a say so unless they shout their way in. So again, it's making sure the organisation is aware of all these challenges, that team members also, cognizant of the challenges that each person in their individual circumstances are facing, and welcoming, I suppose, to people's inputs and wanting to interact in a multifaceted way. So yeah, it's an interesting world we're in. Personally, I mean, my very first role, my first professional role in the industry was remote. So I used to live in a bedsit in Norwich and work most of the nights moderating, and I know exactly what it's like to feel disconnected from your home base, as it were. So yeah, all of that experience has been put into what we offer our clients in terms of helping them develop the one single unified culture and experience for people, rather than these layers. A bit like an onion, you can end up with these multiple layers where different groups have different experiences, and effectively we have multiple cultures, which is not great.
Nice. I like that all your experiences kind of led you to where you are now, and you're able to pull on that experience that you've been there and you've done that. So when you're consulting, it's not just hypotheticals; it's real life experiences that brings a lot of value to the table, which is great.
Yes, I think we, the reality is we can all find frameworks and we can all refine frameworks that are available publicly. There's plenty of books on the topic that have been written by some very smart people. But the reality is like any, Coca-Cola case study, there's only so much you can learn from one person's model that applies to a body of experience that they have. I think it's critical that these systems that other people have created are then passed through the ringer, as it were. And I think this is the one thing that we've done a lot, me and my colleagues, is applied these models in real life experiences with companies in multiple sectors. And we can say, well, these things work, these things don't work, that works better in this set of circumstances, and so on. And there's no quick fix to any of that. You just have to be willing to experiment and to apply the systems. So no, to your point, I think the best consultants are the ones with that body of experience who can point to situational experimentation. But, there are some very good models out there that people have put out, and it's not to bash those. But, you have to apply them freely and learn from that.
So in September, we launched the Digital Community Leaders Report, which was a 6-month project to survey and better understand the community profession. The report is now kind of freely available at communityleaderssurvey.com. We can download a free copy, or you can order your very own printed copy. And Blaise, you were involved in providing some expert thoughts, which are in here. And today we're going to go through kind of 3 takeaways you have from the report and just kind of chat them through. So let's dive headfirst into what your first kind of thought or takeaway was from the Digital Community Leaders Survey report.
Sure. The first one is I very much like the picture above my quote, but I won't pick that one for one of my three. There were some much better sections. Yeah. But I mean, I'll point it out just in case we can slip this in and point people to, and I can't remember the page. I can't remember, but it was a very interesting way of onboarding people through the use of Mural. Yeah, I do recommend checking it out. But no, thoughts one. So I think starting near the beginning of the report, I really liked the blowout around membership organisations exploding, and I think it's a very reassuring aspect of community development at the moment. We know that people want to find support. There's a lot of people in the no longer in the workplace right now. There's a lot of layoffs, a lot of change economically. I think it's incredibly stressful for a lot of people, and it's very reassuring to me that we as community builders can offer that supportive environment through membership organisations where people can find support and they can grow in a collaborative way. And I think there's never been a time in the last 10, 20 years where we've needed it most. Certainly I'm sure there have been large economic downturns in the past, but we wouldn't have had access to this technology. And I think that's a really positive outcome of all of this. So we know that people want to go back, are going back to face-to-face working in larger numbers due to the organisational pressure. Whether that's a good thing or not, I mean, that's a whole other discussion. But I think ultimately we do know that there are huge benefits that have come out of this availability and this recognition of the power of online communities. And I think in a professional setting, we do have a really big opportunity to bed that perception in. I also think it's a less risky environment than your typical social media network type of situation, which, quite rightly so, has had a lot of flack thrown at it. We know that there's a lot of negative and unpleasant and unsafe behaviour on social media networks versus, secure and managed online community spaces. We also know that social media is through TikTok, we can see it's a lot more about consumption of content rather than interaction. So I found the member-wise comments, 41% increase in online community growth and adoption. Yeah, and there was a second quote in the report from Beamer around the value of their Next Generation Digital Leaders Internship Program and how that's come out of their member collaboration in their members' community and their membership organisation. And I think it's a great thing that we have, I'd say, managed to make these spaces quite mature at this stage. The fact that they're a combination of this massive amount of shared knowledge. So it reminds me a lot of wikis, which are high intensity in terms of engagement and quite limited in terms of participation in the sense of creating community, whereas a membership organisation is a lot easier to create value and create content in small bits in a conversational manner or in an event setting.
For membership organisations, we kind of see that there's been a large adaptation for them to kind of pick up communities and online communities. And I see that because arguably it's never been easier to start a community outside your local, postcode, because the barrier to entry is so low in terms of picking up some of the software we see online. I guess the interesting thing will be to see how that pans out, whether or not they take the jump into bringing in professionalism around community managers themselves, because you can, jump into to Guild or to Mighty Networks or open a Slack or whatever you want, and you can start community, but moving that from being run by the person who's just got free time in the office to being actually, this is something we're taking seriously. That's the jump. And I would be interested next time we run the report to see actually how many of those organizations have taken the jump from being, this is kind of something we started to something that we're continuing with and investing heavily into. I know that in the CMX report a few years ago, they reported that, money was being poured into community, but that was during the pandemic, and it'd be interesting to see what that looks like in a year or two time.
Yeah, well, I think in terms of the professionalisation, there's compared to what I saw 10 years ago, let's say. There's a lot more training available. I think the Meta did a lot of great work around their certification and helping people who were running, I suppose, hobby communities or volunteer communities, and helping upskill them to a point where actually if they could monetize the community, then it was a form of professionalization. And I think, that on the point of monetization, I think going back to membership organizations and their communities, there's a lot more experience and knowledge and toolkits allowing you to do that upsell and cross-sell. So I think the return on investment is slightly easier to interpret in some situations. I think others are still quite tricky, but in the case of membership organizations, if you have a good solid funnel and a good comprehension of where the community fits in the funnel, why it's there, what you're trying to encourage people to do, and where the, I suppose, monetary value for the organization comes in, it's a lot easier to track that and then reinvest or employ someone dedicated on it. And I think generally for membership organizations, my feeling is that we're not seeing so many, people who are doing it in a few hours a week. It's at least a part-time job, if not a full-time job. And certainly the clients I'm speaking with, they have a dedicated community manager.
Nice. Fab. Let's slide on to your thought too. What's your second big takeaway from the report?
Okay, so this time I do have a page 48. I remember this. So it's the page that covers challenges and risks to be overcome in 2024 and what community managers are seeing in terms of the environment they're in and what they need to focus on. I'm going to pick up on something nestled in the middle, which is tech changes, including AI. And in parallel to it, there's two diagrams there. In parallel, on the other side of it, is developing the right skills, which obviously I think sits very nicely side by side. Now, I did spend a lot of time in the social media industry as well as the community industry, so I've seen some of these developments. I think the social media industry in some ways is ahead of community management now because of the mass use of it. We saw similarity in the early days, 2009, I suppose, once we started developing scale to 2012, where everyone was a generalist. You created the content, you did the engagement, you did moderation, you tried to, sell stuff and calm people down and deal with crisis and so on. And then from about 2013 and 14, probably as social media became a bit more about content and a bit more about advertising, we saw those specializations of roles. And, the last social media team I headed up, there were specialists, and I had divisions in strategy, insight, creative and engagement, and so people didn't have to worry, can I write content? Can I just focus, maybe I can just focus on engaging with people. And, I think on one hand, the industry is fantastic. The community industry is fantastic in that a generalist can come in and do a great job and get a lot of traction in what they're doing. At the same time, I think the focus on developing the right skills and the tech developments are similar to what happens with social listening. For example, all of the insight tools that started appearing around social media. And I think we're going to see a need, or we are seeing a need where people are having to create more varied content. I mean, what we're doing here, for example, creating a podcast, I think is quite typical. It often sits with a community team. Doing webinars sits with a community team in some capacity, or at least we have to create some around our communities. So there's a lot more multimedia skills needed, and there's definitely now scope for, the volume of content being created for a specialist role. In the same way with the tech side, with AI and prompt engineering or tool setup or, data stream management and so on and so forth, I think, again, we're going to start seeing a bit more segmentation. And I'm looking forward to, for community managers to either go into specialist departments in their workplace, whether that's the tech team, and say, well, look, can I help upskill you in dealing with my platform? Or going into the insight team and saying, well, look, I've got this data stream and it needs analyzing. And what I want to do is find out this, and can you tell me that, and so on. And how can I help you, A, develop an interest, and B, develop the skill set? So I think it's not necessarily about the community manager becoming a specialist in that sense. It's also carrying on the great work that community managers do, which is identify the right person, engage with them, find out what they need, and then help them do what is good for the community, I suppose. Which takes me back to my point about doing everything we do, but internally as well. It's the same skills.
Yeah. It is, and we see so many, like I said, we see so many community managers who are excellent generalists. And then what I am finding fun in when I get to chat to community managers is those that have often been around a bit longer, have found their thing that they want to be doing. They don't want to be doing everything from, setting up Slack to analyzing how people are leaving. They don't want to do everything. They want to specialize, which is understandable, as often happens in career paths. And it will be interesting to see over the next 3-5 years how that progresses, as especially in the UK, the profession kind of moves onwards, and we start seeing those specific roles. And it'd be interesting to see what some of those job titles are that we start seeing floating around. We're already starting to see kind of, head of communities and chief community officers and that kind of stuff. And what is the niches under that? What does that fallout look like? It'll be a fun to see over the next few years.
Yeah, well, I think we can look at we can look at marketing and we can look at social media. I think it will be around creative. It will be around data analysis and technical skills, and maybe SEO and advertising. I mean, that's something I think I don't see spoken about enough, and I feel that whenever I have a bit of a gap for my own content output, I think I should talk about that. I think that part of the user acquisition funnel is not touched upon enough, and I think there's a lot of things that work really well that people are probably just not aware of. But I think ultimately being able to engage with, again, going back on my experience, the benefits I saw of being able to engage specialists, there's probably about 3 main aspects that I felt my team and me benefited from. And one is that you get a far greater diversity of perspective, particularly where you're trying to build diverse communities with a lot of members from different sides of society. I think you need to have a team that represents that. So particularly where conversation itself is quite dynamic and is so affected by what is going on in society, though each of those specialists are bringing their own perspective from their own backgrounds into play. And from a team cohesion and team output perspective, you just make better content, you engage better, you're more aware. Being able to lean to a colleague who has a different background in life and saying, well, am I saying the right thing here? Is this the right way to respond is invaluable. And you just can't do that on your own as a generalist. Another aspect is around innovation and creativity. I held an innovation brief at the exec level some time ago. And again, doing it on your own or with very small teams, you have a bit of tunnel vision. I think once you start blowing out your team and bringing in, again, a variety of opinions and experiences, it really helps foster that creativity that you need in innovation. And, I'm just very aware of the limitations of my experience. I have broad experience, I can share some very interesting stories, but I'm very conscious that other people that I talk with come from completely different backgrounds or different experiences that I cannot imagine. It's the old expression, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And being able to hear that in a meeting of someone challenging you and saying, no, have you considered this? That's how you come up with great new ideas.
Yeah. The more you know, the more you realize you don't know. Fab. Okay, let's we're on a roll. Let's go on to the third and final thought you have from the report, Blaise.
Sure. So page 98 in this case, I'm going to stick with skill sets. Now, I think we look at, if we look at the graph, I think content is at the top. It's what you'd expect. But as I said around SEO and advertising, and I touched upon research and insight, I think there are other aspects that are not being looked at as much. Now, again, as a generalist, you do have to triage your opportunities and prioritize your time. My feeling around particularly research and insights is that without it, you can't strategize effectively. Just not possible. I mean, I think any strategy is going to be a bundle of assumptions without good research and insight. And not many people have those hard skills. We help a lot of clients with those reports. There's a variety of reports that we provide. And ultimately, it always leads to better outcomes for the community. So whether that's understanding how the communities are performing, which a lot of topics of conversation online in the community space is still around not being convinced that people know. A lot of community managers don't feel comfortable knowing whether their community is performing well or not. Also looking at what trends and key topics are driving the target personas. My experience, what I'm seeing is that often communities community programs do not have personas or clearly defined target personas, and hence how can we know what the trends and behaviours are and lean into that? So the content is a bit generic. And then, going back to looking at the SEO value of the content being produced and leveraging social media channels for acquisition is not an area that's really looked at in terms of driving adoption. I think it's also represented in one of the results, which is that word of mouth is still the key driver. Now, the problem with word of mouth is it's great, but it's just me and my friends, and we all think alike. And again, in terms of diversity of the community, you end up with a very monolithic perspective. Typically, the stronger that core view is, the harder it is for newcomers to join and express other opinions and views, and it doesn't lead to dramatic growth, basically. So I think these are all areas of potential growth for leaders. I think it'll help with their decision making generally. It'll help with optimizing that user engagement far better than sort of just looking at what is happening in the community. I don't know how much community leaders are performing competitive analyses, and something that we did a lot of with social because it's very easy. All the tools, all the data was mostly free and all easily accessible through tools like Brandwatch. With community, it is harder, so we do a lot of desk research around competitive analyses. But there's a lot to learn from other people's mistakes always and successes. And then just generally that personalised member experience. I think we can't necessarily look at what the people in the community are doing on its own. We have to look at the people who we want to attract and what they're doing, and to understand how to attract them. And I think we can do a lot more around that target persona definition.
With that kind of data analysis, that is a fairly different skill set to away, not different, but it is definitely niched away from the your kind of average community manager who's doing everything. Is there resources you could point people at, or tools, maybe software or frameworks that you've created where it's like, there's this huge world of data analysis, but here's the things, or here's where you could start. Here's like 5 quick things you should maybe be thinking about or focusing on. Do you know any of resources or tools that could help kind of get people started?
So yes, I think the 2 tools that probably are linked the closest to community data analysis are Comsor and Common Room. Common Room in particular has some great resources on their website around how one can analyse community data. Feverbee as well. Richard Millington has put out a huge amount of content over the years around benchmarking, analysing performance, and extracting insight from that. So all those places are great places to start. I have frameworks that I haven't publicised. I mean, the challenge I've had over the years is a lot of my work has been under NDA or proprietary. So I'm sort of slowly rebuilding my toolkit under my own brands. The company, the agency's only been running for was in its 2nd year, so it's still early days. But I hope to put out some content. But otherwise, no. I think I do think the best places to look here is sideways. I think going to, for example, the Sprout Social set of resources. I know it's social media, but a lot of the methodologies apply as well. If you can acquire data or apply those methodologies on external communities and just do desk research and observational analysis, it will get people a lot further down the line just by doing that. There just isn't the wealth of tools that social media has for community management yet. So I think a lot of it has to be desk research.
As a business, as we grew up, I had to start really leaning on data for some of the decisions we were making, whether being around budgetary or whatever it is. And a book that really helped me kind of separate my decision making was the 6 thinking hats. So the concept that when you are making a decision, there's various colored hats you can wear, and those hats ask you to think in a particular way. So it might be one that you only need to think about the gut feeling around this decision, and actually facts don't matter. It's just what your gut feeling is. One might be we purely want I can't remember them all, an emotional response or a factual response or an analytical response. And for me, when I'm chatting with my management team, I will ask them for what response I'm looking for. So I'm looking for a gut feeling here, or actually, I only want you to think about the facts. So from the facts point of view, what's the decision that should be made? So I really think when I'm approaching, especially a big chunky problem, which might affect the next 1, 2, 3 years, I like to put on various different hats and then almost talk to myself from those different angles, because actually something in your gut can feel really right. But when you look at it on paper, the facts are just saying the data says your gut feeling is wrong and you need to readdress where you're coming from. And I find that a really helpful tool in my kind of toolbox of decision making.
Yeah, no, I've used that technique. I think I approach. I mean, I suppose I've not sat in the CEO seats until now, so it's the experience has been a bit different. I've sat as part of an exec who's usually had to put forth my opinions to a CEO. I like the. I think it's called a 3x5 approach, where you ask a team to put down their thoughts of what a solution could look like to a problem statement. They each take 3 minutes to write down on their sheet on the wall or sticky notes, and then everyone slides down, and they then have to either write down new ideas that are not there, or take someone else's idea that has been left behind and mash it up with one of theirs, or come up with a new combination. But then you keep sliding down until you have something like 300 odd ideas, 280 of which are absolute garbage and derivative and of no interest, but you get the absolute most random and interesting output, mashups and combinations of ideas from it. And by which point, also by the end of the program, people are putting down what they think is nonsense because their brains are completely fried after about 10 or 15 minutes. But sometimes that's the best, no filter ideation, and that can be very effective as well.
I love those kind of sessions. I love those kind of sessions where often quantity is what we're looking for over quality, because it's just get into that flow state where you're just trying to get your kind of subconscious down on paper. And actually, someone we use facilitation often is like, there's no bad idea, just get anything down. And it's always fun. Fab. Blaise, I really appreciate your time today. I really appreciate your expertise in the report and just generally being involved in this process. It's been great having you on. If people wanted to reach out and kind of chat to you about any of your thoughts, or just reach out to find out more about what you're up to, where's the best place to talk to you?
Well, I can be found on LinkedIn, as you'd expect. And then most other channels, I have switched off my Twitter pretty much and moved to Threads. I know it's got a long way to go, but I do believe that it is a slightly better place to be at the moment. But otherwise, no, istheanswer.consulting. You can send me an email from there and reach me for any discussions.
Perfect. Thanks for your time, Blaise. I'll chat to you soon.